Now, Charlie Landsborough's story is one of determination and faith, overcoming all kinds of obstacles, really. He was in his early 50s before he found real success in the music industry, and since then he's been going quite literally from strength to strength. He's about to start a 2-month tour of the country, and he'll be joining us in Cambridgeshire on Saturday, March the 13th at Peterborough's Cresset. But he's found time to be with us this afternoon for a bit. Charlie, welcome. It's nice to talk to you again.
It's smashing to be back with you, Richard.
Bless you. I suppose the first thing we ought to ask is how the new album's going.
Well, it's going great. I mean, I had misgivings about it because I thought I hadn't been long enough around to have a best of, but Mick Clerkham, the boss of Ritz, was perfectly right, and it's done incredibly well for me. Got to, I think, 41 in the British pop chart, so I won't complain.
Now, this is, I mean, we know it's the culmination of what? How many years' work?
I've been playing my guitar and singing around pubs and clubs and things since I was about 18 or something, so it's an awful long time, and I've been playing the guitar and singing since I was 3, so, you know, look at the picture of me and then gauge the distance between those two.
Indeed.
It's some time indeed, yeah. In fact, those records you just played, I was a little lad when we used to listen to Guy Mitchell and Frankie Lane and Johnny Ray and people like that were around when I was a lad.
That's right. It just it occurred to me while I was playing that record, Answer Me, I don't know whether you share my memory, the BBC banned it, didn't they?
That's right, because it was Answer Me, Lord Above.
Lord Above, yeah, and it was banned by the BBC.
Right, yeah.
The interesting thing, Charlie, is, I don't know whether you know this, somebody told me this, I didn't know it, but somebody in the BBC told me that once a record is banned by the BBC, there seems to be no machinery for unbanning it. So I suppose that technically the thing we've just played is a banned record.
Shame upon you, Richard.
It's incredible in this day and age, isn't it? Anyway, let's go back to the beginning. Where were you born, Charlie?
Well, I was actually born in Wrexham. You know, I'm a war baby, which you can gather by looking at me, I think. But my mother was just taken there, and then I was brought straight back to Merseyside. And I spent my early life in Merseyside until I joined the army when I was about 20.
You come from a fairly enormous family, I think, don't you?
Well, I'm the youngest of, there was 11 of us, and 2 children that died before I came on the scene, so originally there was 13, you know. And the house, I went back to look at it not so long back, before they pulled it down, and it's amazing that all those people lived there, and we had a house full of animals too, including a duck and chickens in the back, and dogs and cats and lovebirds from Africa and budgies, and at one time a monkey. So when I looked at it, I couldn't believe, I mean, it seemed big to me when I was a small boy, but so small in reality.
Let me ask you this. A family that size, how do you become a part of that? How can you feel that importance that you must give to every child in a family that size? How do parents manage to do it?
I don't know how they did, but great credit to me mum and me dad, because they did manage to do that. I was very privileged, because being the youngest, I was very well looked after, and I also was doted upon by my brothers who were sailors at that time, would come back from all parts of the world with gifts for me, so I was very, very lucky indeed. But I'm sure nobody in the whole crowd of us ever felt left out, although I was a little bit more spoiled than the rest of them.
Good on you. What did your parents do? What did your dad do particularly?
Well, my dad, God bless him, as far back as I can remember, he couldn't work because of illness, and the only job he had was a bookies runner, which was illegal in those days. So he spent most of his life betwixt the pub and the betting shop, running up and down entries and things with bets from the local people. My mother was just a housewife, you know. Everybody else worked. As I said, my brothers were all at sea, and my sisters were in shops and things like that. But my dad, God bless him, he used to sing in the pub, and I believe when he was a lad he had a great voice. They billed him locally as the silver voice tenor, and he still had a fine voice as I remember him.
Now, you said you and your mother were evacuated. I mean, that must have been a bit of a rough blow for the rest of the family then, surely?
Well, I don't think we were away that long, you know. It's to me now, I look back and think, isn't it a bit ridiculous to take my mother out of harm's way, have me born, and then bring us straight back as soon as I'm born? It's as if, you know, you're impervious to bombs once you've arrived on the face of the earth. But I don't know, I've never really listened to the family on that score. It must have been very difficult, as you say. My father was some man, because he'd lived with that difficulty a long time, because my mother had 6 children and her first husband drowned in the dock, and my father took on the family and 6 small children, and in days when there was very little work about and everybody was really hard up. So he took an awful lot on, but it says a lot for him that everybody in the family all felt part of the same family. And it even hurts me at times to have to explain why some of my brothers are called England and some of them are called Landsboroughs, but that's the way it is.
And you were named, I think, after your father.
I was named after my dad, and I have a son named the same. I've got a very grand name. It sounds more like a solicitor than a singer. Charles Alexander Landsborough.
Do you know, it's funny you should say that, Charlie. It is tremendously impressive, and while I was reading up before the programme came on, I thought, I wish I'd got a name that sounded as impressive as Charles Alexander Landsborough. I mean, it's, you know, really, Charlie, I mean, I'm probably teaching my grandma how to suck eggs, but that ought to be on the front of these CDs, didn't it, really? I mean, let's have it. Charles Alexander Landsborough. It's a terrific name. Terrific
Thank you very much.
No
well, really, the name stems from... My father always said, that's a Scottish name, son. And I said, I've never heard a more English-sounding name than Landsborough. But my dad was absolutely right, because somebody did some research on the family name, and we came originally from Galloway in Ayrshire, and the family name got changed from originally MacLamrick. So I could have been Charlie MacLamrick.
No, I think Landsborough's probably better. I think you're probably right. I think we'll agree on that.
Yeah.
What was it? Talk to me about Birkenhead at that time. Was it a deprived area? What was it like in your early days?
At that time, I never knew what deprived was, and I never ever felt deprived. But you're right, it was a deprived area, and the view from my front window was the docks, the dumps, the coal wharf, the railway lines, the cobbled road, and things like that. But at the same time, things were much more stable in those days, and everybody stayed in the same area, so you knew everybody around. And it was a wonderful existence. As I say, my family stayed together in those days. You knew everybody looked after everybody else. So although it was deprived in a material sense, it was never deprived in a sort of spiritual sense, if you know what I mean. And it's only later that I realised how sort of deprived we were.
You mentioned looking out of the window and seeing docks and factories and all this kind of thing. So was there any, looking across that lot and bearing in mind the fact that you later realised it was somewhat deprived, were you therefore ever able to dream of any sort of different future? Did you ever consider what the future might bring for you?
Well, I did. I suppose I got some sort of imaginative insights into what the world further afield would be like, because I kept getting these presents and photographs from abroad with my brothers bringing home gifts and things. And I had some wonderful gifts. I had a canoe carved by the natives of West Africa. I had a guitar from Spain. I had a monkey from West Africa. And the first jeans had ever been seen in Birkenhead from Canada and America. So I sort of did get these glimpses, if you like, through. I mean, I used to sit and sniff the guitar, smell the guitar, because I thought, what a wonderful smell, you know, and it used to conjure up exotic sort of visions in my mind. So I did have some sort of an insight with a child's imagination into what lay further afield, and I suppose that drove me on later on to sort of get away in my own way, albeit through the army.
We'll come to that in a minute if we can. In fact, I certainly want to do. But let me just put another point to you. With all those brothers and sisters, was there a particular one to whom you were close, particularly close?
Well, my mum was the sort of centre of my universe, and she was always there. And I wrote a song about her, in fact, and it says, Aggie, you were a lady when the words still had a meaning, a housebound angel dressed in ragged clothes. I don't think I remember ever hearing you complaining. We all took you for granted, I suppose, because my mum was always there, you know. And when she went at 12, it sort of left a huge void in my life, because she was the person, like, if I got hurt outside, I went running in, and my mum was always in the house, you know. So I think it was her more than any brothers, because they were older than me. Everybody was quite a bit older than me. So I didn't have anybody a sort of similar age that I could rely on.
Would you regard your family, or would you describe your family now as still close?
Oh, yeah, we've always been, although we're separated by miles and things, and we may not see each other for a while sometimes, I still feel incredibly close to my family, and they've been very influential in the way I think, I suppose, and the way I feel, and yeah, we're very close. Was
music an important part of your parents' life? I mean, I know your father sang a bit, but was it an important feature of his life, and indeed your mum?
Oh, yeah. I mean, music was always in the house. My father, I joke about it because my dad had come in after a few too many pints, and and my mum would have a bit of a face on her. You know, my dad would try to sing his way out of trouble, but
I know the feeling.
unsuccessfully. Yeah. Oh, you've done it, have you? It doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work at all.
And my mother loved music. I remember getting the first radiogram we'd ever seen, and I think the first record we ever bought was Nat King Cole singing Mona Lisa.
Oh.
And she loved Gracie Fields and Hank Williams, which is a bit of a rare old combination. But and then my brothers, as I say, brought all these guitars back and country music, the likes of Hank Williams and Jimmy Rogers. So there was always music in the house, always visitors in the house. And some of my earliest musical recollections are of sitting, well, I sat on my dad's knee and sang at parties and things. You take the tables and I'll take the chairs. And I remember sitting in a corner when my brothers came back from the ship with their friends and the guitars and the banjos and the crate of beer. And I remember the atmosphere and the great sort of spirituality almost generated by the music that sort of lifted you. And I used to get caught in this vortex of enjoyment. I thought it was great, you know. So, yeah, it's a marvellous household to be brought up in.
What was early school like? I'm not talking at this stage about the grammar school. I'll come to that in a bit. What was your early schooling like?
Well, I went to a school just down the road, Gorby Road Primary School, and a great love of my life in those days was football. And I had some great teachers, and in fact my first sort of earliest sort of religious experience, if you like, was courtesy of a lovely teacher called Mr. Peake, who told me a Bible story when I was about 7 or something, or 8 or something like that. And I thought this was unbelievable. I mean, I lit up like a lamp, you know. So little did he realise the effect and the influence that he had upon me that day, telling me that story. I wondered if he's still alive, and if he was, it'd be nice for him to know, you know. But school was great. It was in the same deprived area, but there was a great sort of, I don't know, a great community spirit about the whole area.
I want to touch upon the religious aspect of that in a little while. I shall not let it go by, I promise you. What were your early ambitions at that time? Can you remember? Did you have any?
Yeah, well, they sort of, I changed, you know, day by day almost. At times I wanted to be an artist, and because I thought I had a flair for painting and drawing and things. But I suppose the main dream became to be a footballer, because I spent sort of waking hours, every waking hour, with a ball at my feet. The girls used to laugh and say, if I went past without me ball, they'd say, God, I don't believe it, Charlie Landsborough without his football, where is it? You know, and I said to me mum, I remember in those days saying, don't worry, ma'am, one day we'll have a few bob, you know, because I'm going to play at Wembley. And I, in fact, did play at Wembley eventually, but it was a guitar and not football.
Good on you. You got into grammar school, so you must have been tidy bright, Charlie.
I was a little bit, yeah, I was all right. And I went, first of all, because I was football mad, I asked my mother, God bless her, to put me down for the secondary school because they played football there and he didn't in the grammar school. So I first of all went to the secondary school, and one of the masters there, a lovely Mr. Evans, said, listen, son, he said, you should go to the grammar school. And he convinced me and talked me into going to the grammar school. But because I was a bit we were a bit hard up, all the lads in the grammar school had all this fancy gear on, and I was there, and I felt a little bit out of my depth. So to compensate, I worked extremely hard for the first couple of years and came top of the class so that nobody could ridicule me. But once I discovered the guitar, I'm afraid my studies went out the window.
Who was guilty of that?
I think the music was guilty of that, and my brothers, because I'd always loved the music and singing, and they had the guitars in the house, and I was very shy in those days. And one day when I thought the house was clear, I was having a go at this guitar and playing the old Harry Lime theme. And my brother came in and caught me, and he said, what are you doing? Do you want to learn the guitar? And I said, yeah. So he taught me a couple of chords, and I was away, and very soon I was playing things like Blueberry Hill and that sort of stuff, you know, the old Fats Domino thing. And I was lost forever. I thought, this is great. I loved singing, and the fact that I could provide my own music was unbelievably nice for me. So I was hooked forever.
And I suppose in all the circumstances it would be entirely appropriate to slip him a cheque now and again, would it, under the circumstances? The man was good to you.
It's funny because one of the stories I always told about that particular time, the headmaster was a lovely man, and he said, years later when I got into a spot of bother, he was asked for a quote on me, and he said, that lad, he said, he had a fine academic career ahead of him until he discovered that damn banjo. The damn banjo's been incredibly good to me since.
Absolutely. You ain't got a spare one, have you? Now, let's to be serious again for a moment. It was at about this time that you very sadly lost your mum.
Yeah,
Was there any? How can I put this? Was this expected? Was there any notice? Was it sudden?
well, it was. She did sort of have a rough time for a while, and it was very sad for me looking on. And I always remember thinking, what could I do if only I could do something? And at the time, there was a story of a weeping Madonna, somewhere, and I thought if I could only get me mum there and put some of these tears on me mum, I know it sounds sad and everything now, but that's the desperation I'd got to, because I'd become to realise that she was ill, and when she went, I don't suppose it was totally unexpected, but nonetheless, it was the most bitter blow of my young life, and it took me an awful long time to come round from there.
How did it affect you, Charlie?
Well, I suppose I sort of shrunk and shriveled inside, because whereas everything, this great stability was there, and the house was always, her presence pervaded the house. Whoever else was out, my mum was always in, and suddenly that was gone. And my brothers, what made it worst, because they were older than me, my brothers and sisters started marrying off. So this once full and happy house with my mum at the centre of it all began to sort of disappear, and emptiness loomed all around me, So I became a little bit sort of fed up with it all, a bit depressed with it all. And I think that was partly responsible for me going a bit off the rails later,
We'll talk about it in a minute, perhaps,
Yeah.
if you want. Having left school, what was your first job? Where did you work first?
Well, I thought the world was going to open up to me when I left school, and I was a bit sad when it didn't, And I finished up, I started off doing a job. I worked in the automatic telephone as what they called a functioneer in those days. All I was doing was testing little bits of electronic equipment. And I used to have to get up at 6 in the morning, and I'd get home about 6:30 at night, and me money was about £3.10 a week, of which I got about 25p, I think, now. And it was that far away from the pier head, and I was that hard up. I remember I'd come out of the automatic telephone company, and I'd have to walk all the way to the pier head, which was quite a few miles, because I'd spent the money for me bus fare on an extra cake at dinner time because I was hungry. Sounds like a Charles Dickens novel, doesn't it? But that was my first job. It didn't last very long, and then I went through a whole succession of jobs, which all through my life. I think the longest job I ever did was, I said before I got married, I never really worked at all. And after I got married, I never stopped.
Ain't that the truth? For various different reasons, of course. You've mentioned twice the fact that you had a bit of bother. So presumably, are you happy to talk about that?
Oh, I don't mind talking about that at all. It was. I'm not proud of the fact.
No.
But it's definitely, it's a part of me, and it's a part of what I did. When I was about 18 or 19, I'd sort of, to be accepted where I lived in this sort of rough area. It'd gone downhill a little bit, the area, and it was a little bit rough. But to be accepted amongst my peers, you had to be either a hard case or a thief. And to my great shame, I had to go at both, just for the excitement and to draw attention to myself, I think. And it was a miserable failure at both, thank God. And I spent about 2 months in Walton Jail, which taught me a great lesson, had a sobering effect upon me. My family were totally in horror, because they had always been very upright and honest and all the rest of it. And they were, horrified, as I say, and I understandably so. But it did have a good effect upon me, because it brought me back down to earth and made me realise that the values they tried to instill in me all those years were right.
You decided, I think, to see a little bit of the world, and I believe you joined the army. Why was this?
Well, really, I wanted to follow my brother's footsteps and join the Navy, and they were all merchant seamen, so I duly went off to Liverpool and went to the different places, and I was too young for some places and too old for others. So I thought, I'll go to the Royal Navy. Went to the Royal Navy office, and it was closed, so I thought, in desperation, I'll go anywhere. Then the Army office was open, so I joined the Army, just to get away from Birkenhead, and applied to go to Hong Kong. I thought that's as far away as I can imagine from Birkenhead, and they sent me to Germany. But that was a good move, actually, because I did really enjoy myself. I started playing with army bands, and I learnt the German language, well, colloquial. So it was a good move, and I've met great friends through that are since catching up with me now all around the British Isles.
Where were you? What mob were you in then, Charlie?
I was in the artillery.
Right.
Because my probation officer, sounds awful, that doesn't it, was an old artilleryman himself, and I think he wanted to get me off his hands, and he talked me into it, really. I'd sort of I wanted to go in the Navy, and what he'd been saying obviously stayed with me in my mind. And when the Navy offices were closed, I joined the Army and went away, and it turned out no bad thing.
What about where did you do your training, by the way?
I did my training up in Oswestry.
Oh, right.
Up in North Wales, yeah. And then I went down to Salisbury.
Yeah.
And then came back up to Rhyl, and then went across to Germany, where I was in Fallingbostel, a little village up in the northern part of Germany.
Right, okay. Now, I'm just trying to put your... you would just about have missed, in any event, national service, wouldn't you?
I did, yeah. I joined up, but I was still in when the National Service people were still in.
Yes.
And they were leaving.
That's right, yeah.
They were some great characters amongst them, and they were always moaning about the Army and giving out about it.
Of course, of course.
Well, of course, but at the same time, I think secretly they enjoyed a lot of it, and when they were going, there were some great lads, you could see almost tears in their eyes, because it's like, a family, isn't it, when you're in the Army together. And once somebody leaves after a couple of years, it's like losing one of the family almost. But great days.
It's interesting you should say that, because, I did national service. And
you were one of the moaners, were you?
Well, I was one of the moaners, yeah. But rather more to the point, that I accept entirely what you say about one thing. Yeah. There are no circumstances, I would suggest, and you may agree, in civilian life in which you form that depth of relationship with other people of your own sex.
That's right, absolutely, and it stays with you forever. And you can see in civvy life, you can have a friend, and you don't never really know them. You can meet them twice a week in the pub.
That's it.
But in the Army, you live with them, so you know exactly who the liars are and who the cheats are and who the good lads are, don't you? You know everybody right down to the ground, and you live with them, and you grow to you're like brothers in the end, aren't you? As you say, there's no sort of civvy street equivalent for it. And I sort of bemoan the fact that people throw their hands up in horror that there isn't national service, because I think it's very good for the character.
I've put my cards on the table over national service, and what I've always said, I'm not entirely in agreement with you, what I've always said is that in my case I found that whilst it didn't do me any particular great harm, I'm not altogether convinced that it did me very much good either, apart from the qualification of the comradeship and the learning to live together with all kinds of people, and that side of it.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly one of the very strong points in favour of it, because you do learn to cope with different situations, different people from all walks of life. And from the dockside of Birkenhead, I went in, and then suddenly I'm in amongst lads who'd come from Salisbury and Wiltshire and Scotland and all the rest of it, and you learn to understand the different dialects and different sort of stratas of society, if you like. And
different humour, I think.
And totally different sense of humour, yeah. And it's I think it was great sort of learning ground for me.
Did your service time influence your music at all, do you think? Or has it since done?
I think what it did, it brought me out my shell a little bit, because I started playing in a band, and when I joined the Army, there was a band from the Remy, and one of my mates told them Charlie was a singer, so they brought me in, and I got in the band, and then I had to shrug off somewhat this shyness that surrounded me, and I don't know whether it influenced me, my music in any other way, other than that it gave me the courage to go out and do it, but I missed the sort of Merseyside and the Merseybeat boom because of the Army. I joined it as that all took off, and then I tried to write similar stuff from a distance, if you like, and my early stuff was awful.
So you missed out being a Beatle.
Well,
dare we say?
Yeah, I played in a band that became the Undertakers in those days.
Right.
They weren't that when I played with them, and I was a lead guitar player. And we should have played, one of my regrets is they played the Grosvenor Ballroom in Wallasey with the Silver Beatles when they were called the Silver Beatles.
Good Lord.
And I didn't turn up, and I missed the opportunity of meeting the lads when they were right at the beginning,
I think Army life then began to bore you a bit. Would it be fair to say?
Yeah, and I also didn't get my hair cut, and I wanted the music.
Oh, tell me about it, yes. Disgusting, wasn't it?
I remember having 3 haircuts in about an hour. The sergeant major sent me off, and I come back, and he said, I thought I told you to get your haircuts. I said, I have done. He said, go and get it done again. And I had 3 in an hour. So I think that was one of the things. I wanted the freedom also. I think the discipline had its day, and I wanted to be out on my own and pursuing my music, if you like. I really did miss the lads when I went back home, but and the comradeship, you know. But I was glad to be out.
Charlie, okay, so you're now out the mob and you're effectively on the sausage roll. What did you do next?
Well, I came back and I was a bit disillusioned because I was back to where I'd been before, you know, back in Birkenhead, no work, no money and nothing else, you know. So I started playing my guitar around the pubs and clubs and things, and the local pubs. And then my old army mates from down south phoned me up and said, Charlie, would you come to Germany? He said, I've got this band over there, and he said, come over and sing with us, you know. So I didn't have any money, and I got the little bit together that I could, and I hitched down to Worthing, and then we crossed across over to the continent and hitched up to Dortmund, and I had this audition with the band over there, and they were saying, I'd been playing country music in the local pubs and things, and they said, do you know any sort of Tamla Motown, mate? And I said, no. Well, do you know any blues stuff? No. Do you know any soul stuff? No. And I thought, and I had about £50 or the German equivalent in my pocket. I thought, well, this is going great, you know, I'm going to be back, hitching back to Birkenhead, you know. And then they said to me, do you know any Ray Charles? And I knew Georgia, the old Hoagie Carmichael song. Great song, you know. And I said, I know Georgia. He said, sing that then. So I sang it and I was in. So I went over and stayed in Germany for about a year. Then I got married and come home, and then started a succession of jobs. I worked as a navvy on the gas board, then I was a grocery store manager. I went down to Coventry for a while as a postman. You name it, I had a go at it. And then latterly, when the navvying seemed to be getting a bit too hard for me, I thought, what can I do? And I went back to my education and started a teachers training college in Liverpool, and then taught for 14 years.
Before we come to that, I just want to take you a bit further down the road. How did you meet your wife? Where?
Well, when she moved in, I lived in a sort of bit of a rough area of Birkenhead, and she moved in, and this vision that I saw at the time, you know, and she was a bit sort of grand for us. She never spent any time around our area. She'd always dress up, and you'd see her heading off to Chester, which is a very sort of nice area altogether, you know. So all I would see of her was her passing, you know, and I'd wait for her passing, and that was it. And I was too shy to even speak to her. And I found out that she worked down the road in one of the factories, and I had one good, decent set of clothes. So every day, at say, at 5 o'clock or whatever it was when she was due out, I'd go and put my good clobber on, go down and stand on the corner. Never said nothing. It was ridiculous, really. And she'd walk past and never even look at me. So I'd been sort of had this fancy for her for years before I came back from Germany on one leave, and she was in a club I happened to go in. And although I couldn't dance, I got up on the dance floor and had a little bit of a dance with her. And that was it, we were away.
Indeed. And you were married when?
Oh, I'll be in trouble now because I can't remember. I think it was about 65. We've been married over 30 years now.
Mm-hmm. And children?
I've got 3 grown-up lads, the youngest of which is 22, the oldest is 30, and the middle lad is 28, and they're all into the music, love the guitar playing and love the songs.
Right. Now, I'll just touch a little. I mean, I take note of what you say about the jobs. I know a store manager, a driver, navvy, and quality control engineer, all manner of things. And then this business of going back. It must have been a bit of a culture shock, if I may say so, to have to go back to teachers training college, surely.
Well, it was great initially because I think it was Friday, I was knocking a road out with a jackhammer, you know.
I do.
And then on the Monday afternoon, I was listening to Mozart in this nice warm classroom. I thought, this is great, you know. Fantastic, what a transition. And my friend in there, would you believe, was Jimmy McGovern, who wrote the Cracker series and all that stuff. So, and Jimmy was a great lad. I met lovely people in the training college. And then once that was up after 3 years, I got my teacher's certificate and then went into schools, which was, frightening because I went in, taught in the same deprived area that I was brought up in. Very rough school with all the problems of a deprived area, you know. And latterly, I mean, I really hated teaching, although I'd met some great children and I still go back and see the staff who were lovely people.
Do you think that your background, which you readily admit was in that sense deprived, do you think it helped you when you got to teaching in those same schools?
I think so, yeah. I think all of these different experiences that I've had during the course of my life and having to adapt in different situations helps you. And you bring that experience with you when you go to teach children because you can see them sort of going through the same sort of phases that you went through yourself and living in the same area. And having grown up in that area, I could relate to some of the problems that they had. So it made me possibly a little bit more have a little bit more empathy and be a bit more sympathetic. And you would feel sorry sometimes. Young girls would come in who'd come from sort of very sort of leafy suburbs, and they came in, and their first teaching job would be in our school, which was with all its problems, and they didn't last very long, some of them, unfortunately.
No.
And you could sympathise. I was a bit more equipped because of my background to cope with it and possibly to give some of the children.
So in actual fact, it worked both ways. It worked for you and them as well, then.
Well, hopefully,
yeah, quite. Did you? I mean, you. I know that you wrote during the time that you taught. Presumably, you were writing songs then.
I was, yeah. And in fact, when I was complaining about teaching, and I laugh now because I still do wake up in a cold sweat some nights thinking that I'm back in the classroom with 30 of the worst monsters that I taught over the years. But one night when I was bemoaning the fact that I taught, my wife said, well, really, you should be very thankful for all the years you taught, because out of those years, she said, came Forever Friend, which is one of my songs, which has become like an anthem and is played in churches. And so I thought, yeah, you're right. And you know, it's other songs as well. I mean, things that my ears can do were written for school assemblies. So the children have often been the inspiration behind the songs, and in fact the theme for some of the songs. I mean, What Colour is the Wind? It's back to children again. So, yeah, I should thank them.
And of course, at this time, you were on, as it were, the country scene, and you were inevitably, therefore, would come across people like, well, I know George Hamilton the Fourth. Daniel O'Donnell, Foster and Allen, and people like this. I mean, was this what led you? Because you went at about this time to Ireland.
Well, I started writing out of frustration. You know, I'd been playing in Dockside. I played in one Dockside pub in Birkenhead for 22 years, you know. Yeah. And I was naive enough to think that some musical fairy godmother or whatever was going to come and whisk me away to stardom. And when I knew that was not the truth, I started to write in the hope that that would bring me closer to my musical goal, you know. And the writing led me along the way into... I remember watching George Hamilton years before on Canadian television, and I waited to the end of the show hoping there would be an address to send one of my songs to, and there wasn't. And I started writing, and years later I was in the garden, and the phone went, and my wife said, there's George Hamilton on the phone here. He's talking about you on Radio Mersey. He's been talking about you, somebody just said. And then I went in, I thought, it's one of the lads pulling me leg, and this cultured American voice said, hello, Charlie, you know, that's my impersonation, forgive it. You know, he said, hello, Charlie, this is George Hamilton. And I thought, that's a very good... So I said, sardonically, I said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah, I'm Charlie, yeah. He said, gee, I love your songs. He said, I thought, that's too good. It is George Hamilton, you know. And what a gracious gentleman he is, you know. So the music and the songwriting brought me into touch with some great people who've remained friends ever since, like George Hamilton, Foster and Allen, Daniel O'Donnell. Lovely people who I met as a direct result of the things that I'd written. So I'm ever thankful.
It's quite interesting. You should mention that business with the telephone call and George Hamilton, because I had a similar experience to that, which I turned a bit to capital, I think. I was in the shower one morning and the phone rang, and her, who must be a maid, said... it's Daniel O'Donnell on the phone, wants you. So I said, OK. So I came downstairs, I thought, oh, it's Daniel O'Donnell. And off we went. And I'm certainly not going to try and take him off. But anyway, we had this conversation about what matters nothing. But the interesting thing was that, along with, I think, several other ladies, the lady who lived next door to us would die for him, you see. Yeah. So I said to my missus, I said, listen to this. So when I'd finished talking to him, put the phone down, I rang next door and said, have you been ringing us? So she said, no, why? And I said, because the line's been engaged. And she said, no. I said, it was Daniel O'Donnell. It was who? It was quite a bit of fun. Now, anyway, back to you, Charlie. There was a turn round, I think, in your musical fortunes, 1994, which I think you would attribute to faith. I think. Well,
a mix. Well, obviously, ultimately to faith, absolutely to faith. Yeah, but other people were instrumental in the good luck. And you mentioned before that I'd started going to Ireland, so this sort of cycle of events began. And Foster and Allen became great friends. And on one of the trips there, they said, "Charlie, we'll do an album." And so I did an album in Tony Allen's studios in Moat, in the Midlands of Ireland. and it was picked up on by Ritz. Took the album on board, and then Jerry Anderson in the north of Ireland began to play it in the Derry area, and got this great reaction, and then put me on his television show, and watching that night was Pat Kenny in Dublin, who wanted me on his show. I did the show, but had no album, no new album to go along with that show, and the interest fizzled out. And then in '95, I had this offer from Foster and Allen. They said, "Charlie, will you do our support in the spring of '95?" And I thought, great, this is me big chance, you know. And I accepted the offer. And this was in the October of '94. And in January of '95, they phoned me up to say, "We're sorry, Charlie, we're not having a support." So this was yet another sort of rejection and a big downer in my life. And it coincided with a time when I was having trouble with my faith, arguing with God, saying, "Listen, I don't understand you, Lord. You give me musical gifts, and everywhere I turn, I get, you know, I run into a brick wall. Why did you give them to me if I'm not to use them?" And then I gave in spiritually and said, "Well, your will be done. You know, if I'm meant to be a teacher, you'll have to help me out, because I don't like it very much." And came away from the phone arguing with God and sort of everything. And then following day, phoned up the Pat Kenny show and said, "Would you be interested in having me back?" And they said, "Charlie, we've been trying to get you since September. Can you come this week?" And I went and did the one show. Got this amazing reaction. Unfortunately, the new album was there. The Ritz organisation was behind me, and they fed the demand, and I went straight into the Irish charts at #2, and the following week #1, and I've never looked back since.
And that was with you in mind, was that?
No, the original one was called "What Colour Is the Wind."
Oh, right,
and that was a song I sang on the show. "Forever Friend" and "What Colour Is the Wind", the two major songs, really.
Right.
And they did the trick.
We've got about a minute and a quarter, something like that, before we have to part, sadly. So, first of all, let me say that Shirley of Chisel has said hello to Charlie, and they're coming to see him in Peterborough and in Brentwood. So they're listening to this now. Can I also ask you, what's next?
Well, I'm going to Nashville in June to record an album with somebody I admire very much, his work I admire very much, a man called Jim Rooney, who produces people like Nancy Griffiths and John Prine. So that's the next sort of musical venture. And apart from that, I'm doing my tours of the UK and Ireland, spring and autumn. So, and then possibly we'll be stepping into Europe. I don't know. God will lead me to the right place anyway. So
the faith is now, shall we say, unshakable?
Well, yeah, as unshakable as it's possible in a human being, I think. He's looked after me, and he's put me where I always wanted to be, which was in a life of music. So I'm very happy, and I thank God for that.
Have you got any message for the fans who might be listening, Charlie?
Just to thank them because they've been incredibly good to me. And you can have all the hype behind you that you wish, but at the end of the day, it's the so-called man in the street, the ordinary man and woman in the street, and they've been incredibly good to me and my family. So God bless you for that, and I don't half appreciate it.
And before we go, will you say hello to Jackie Bates?
Oh, Jackie, the lovely Jackie, I will. God bless you, Jackie. It's lovely to speak to you again via Richard Spendlove, and I look forward to seeing you when we come down.
And God bless you as well, Charlie. It's been an absolute delight again, a pleasure and a privilege.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Thank you, mate. Bye-bye.